22-year-old Grace Millane had just graduated from the University of Lincoln in England, and she decided she wanted to see more of the world and went on a gap year. After traveling to South America for a month and a half, she flew to New Zealand, where she planned on staying for 2 weeks. On the 1st of December, which was the day before her birthday, Grace was in Auckland, New Zealand, getting ready to go on a date with the man that she'd been talking to on Tinder, 26-year-old Jesse Kimson. She got dressed in white shoes and a black dress, carrying a small bag with her, and then went to go meet Jesse at a local bar. It was their very first date, but Jesse greeted Grace by pulling her into an awkward hug, which Grace half-heartedly returned with the one-arm hug. Jesse paid for Grace's drinks, and the two of them went to several more bars, drinking margaritas and shots of tequila. They seemed to be getting along pretty well, and the more they talked, the more Grace relaxed. Then Grace got up and went to the bathroom. As soon as she was out of sight, Jesse grabbed her bag and searched through its contents. Meanwhile, Grace texted one of her friends from back home, telling her that she was on a Tinder date, which was going very well. In Grace's final message to her friend, she said, quote, "He's coming to London next year. I click with him so well. I'll let you know what happens tomorrow." At 9:41 that evening, Grace and her Tinder date were once again caught on CCTV, taking an elevator up to Jesse's room in the City Life Hotel. They were in the elevator for just moments, and then Jesse got out first, followed by Grace. The next day, CCTV caught Jesse leaving his hotel room alone. There was no sign of Grace. He left the hotel early in the morning and returned after purchasing a large suitcase and cleaning supplies, which he took up to his room. Shortly afterwards, he opened Tinder again, sent a message to a different girl asking to meet up. He left that suitcase and cleaning supplies in the hotel and went off to meet his Tinder date. According to the woman that Jesse met that evening, their date did not go well. Actually, he made her extremely uncomfortable, telling her about how it was supposedly impossible for police dogs to sniff out the scent of a human body as long as it was buried at least 4 feet underground. He mentioned that he had a lot of friends that were police officers and that they told him about bodies being buried in the nearby Waitakere Ranges. And I'm confident that I'm saying that wrong, but just know that it's in New Zealand, it's a mountain range, it's gorgeous if you've seen pictures of it, and it's very heavily forested. Jesse also told his Tinder date a story about an acquaintance, and I'm using air quotes on that, an acquaintance of his who had accidentally killed a woman by strangling her to death after having too rough sex. He told this date, quote, "It's crazy how guys can make one wrong move and then go to jail for the rest of their lives." When the date came to an end, Jesse's date realized that they had parked their cars in the same parking lot, and she had this gut feeling that she should not reveal this information, so she decided to lie to him and say that she left her car in the opposite direction. As she walked away, she felt relieved because something about Jesse didn't feel quite right. He messaged her later that night, asking her on a second date. She declined. Later, Jesse rented a carpet cleaning machine from a local store, which he took up to his hotel room, as well as one of the large trolleys that carries the suitcases when they're too heavy to carry by hand. He loaded his new suitcase, which was now very heavy, and the rest of his bags onto the trolley, then wheeled them out to the red Toyota that he had rented. He parked the car in a parking lot overnight, with the suitcase still inside. The next morning, Jesse drove out of the city center, purchasing a new shovel on his way. He was headed to the Waitakere Ranges, the same place he had mentioned on this date the previous evening when he was talking about burying human remains. On December 2nd, Grace's friends and family from back home all wished her a happy birthday, but there was no reply. After 3 days of radio silence from Grace, her worried parents reported their daughter as missing. Initially, New Zealand police believed that Grace had just been busy with her travels and didn't believe that there was any evidence of foul play. But as time went on, it became clear that something was terribly wrong. During their investigation into Grace's disappearance, they'd checked her social media and noticed that somebody had left a comment on one of her Facebook photos after her disappearance, calling her beautiful and very radiant. That account belonged to a man named Jesse Kimpson, and with one Facebook comment, he was officially a person of interest. On December 6th, 2 police officers located Jesse in a food court and approached him to ask questions. Jesse told them that he had last seen Grace on December 1st after their date, but they'd gone their separate ways. He gave the detectives a fake address and didn't mention City Life Hotel where Grace had last been seen. However, they were still suspicious and brought him to the Auckland police station. There, Jesse continued to maintain his innocence. But by now, police knew something that Jesse had not shared with them: the suitcase. Jesse insisted that he hadn't used the suitcase for anything, but couldn't provide a clear answer as to why he purchased it. Investigators descended on Jesse's apartment at City Life Hotel. Despite all those cleaning supplies he'd purchased, luminol testing revealed bloodstains next to the bed. Then, magically, Jesse's story changed. He finally admitted to police that he'd taken Grace back to his hotel room for the purpose of having sex. Quote, "We started having sex. It was, just normal. It was very placid. Then she asked me if we could get into bondage." He told investigators that he was not experienced with BDSM, but when Grace asked him to choke her, he agreed. Apparently, he thought that nothing had gone wrong during the encounter until he woke up the next morning and found Grace still in the same position, with blood running out of her nose. She was dead. Understandably, investigators found it very hard to believe that Jesse had somehow accidentally strangled Grace to death during sex and not realized that she was no longer alive until the next morning. Analysis of Jesse's cell phone activity provided a different version of events. Hours after returning to his hotel room with Grace, he made a series of Google searches about how to dispose of a body. Then he viewed violent pornography, took several photos of Grace for his own gratification. At this stage, Grace was already dead. He didn't call an ambulance or try to resuscitate her. It seemed as if he had been sexually aroused by her death, and possibly he had killed her for his own sexual gratification. Then he bought the suitcase, stuffed Grace's body inside, and buried it in the forest. The story he told to his second Tinder date about a friend who had accidentally choked a woman to death seemed to be a practice run for the story that he would eventually tell the police. He made a series of Google searches about Grace over the next few days, seeing if she had been reported missing. Strangely, he also made a search if New Zealand had any native flesh-eating birds, especially vultures. Despite Jesse's belief that a body buried 4 feet underground was impossible to discover, Grace's remains were found buried in the ranges on the 9th of December 2018. The autopsy confirmed at least part of Jesse's story. Grace had been strangled to death. Despite Jesse's defense team arguing that Grace's death had been an accidental consequence of rough sex, the jury found him guilty of her murder, and he was sentenced to spend life in prison. During the trial, multiple women who had been on Tinder dates with Jesse came forward to testify, including the woman who unknowingly went on a date with him while Grace's body was still in his room. That woman's decision to lie to Jesse about where she had parked her car that night might have been the only thing to save her from meeting the same fate as Grace Millane. That is 10-Minute Murder for today. Brief and bingeable true crime. I'm Joe, the host, and thank you so much for listening today. I've mentioned this before, but I don't mind mentioning it again. There's not a day that goes by in my life since I've started this podcast. What is it, like 3 years ago or something like that? I started it during the pandemic. Super bored at home. I had all of the stuff to make it, so I thought, well, why not? And here we are, several years later, and the thing continues to grow and grow and grow. And I can't thank you enough. And it's not because I'm doing something special. It's because you guys have embraced the show and you've told your friends about it. You've told your family about it. And that's the only reason why it's grown so much. And I just want to take a moment to say thank you. It's not lost on me that there are thousands and thousands of other true crime podcasts out there that you could be listening to. And I listen to a bunch of them myself. because I love true crime, and just doing this show isn't enough to like scratch my true crime itch. So I also listen to podcasts. But the fact that so many of you listen to this and it continues to grow, it just, at times it weirds me out a little bit, if I'm being honest. And at times it just makes me like, I can't believe this is a thing that I do. And it's all because of you that listen. You continue to share the show with your friends and family and coworkers and anyone else that you think could be into true crime. And it shows in the numbers that I get back, like the download numbers I get back. It continues to grow, and I love you all for it. Now, that being said, if you are a new listener to 10 Minute Murder, please take a moment right now to subscribe so that you can catch up on all the back episodes and never miss any of the new ones. Can you do that if you don't subscribe? Yeah, you could do that. But then you're going to find yourself searching for 10 Minute Murder every single time. And then you might as well just subscribe so that it's always there, right? Also, connect with me on social media. 10minutemurder.com has the links to all the places you can find me on social media. And if you like this episode, leave a rating and review wherever you like to listen to podcasts. And again, thank you so much for listening.